wow, if I don't actually perform, if I don't sell, then I have no income.
Yeah.
It's by necessity, right? It's a means to get there, but you on the technical side, but it doesn't get you there on the sales or the customer side. Like the people who will likely be successful are the ones who are really going to push to do it themselves, to make it happen.
This is the Future of the Future show. I am your host, Mateo Berbejicio. Every year, universities produce groundbreaking research, new algorithms, new hardware, new scientific breakthroughs. But turning those ideas into real products that solve real problems in the world is a completely different challenge. There's often what people call the valley of death between a promising proof of concept in the lab and a scalable, commercially viable technology. Crossing that gap requires not just technical brilliance, but a deep understanding of customers, markets, and the realities of building a company. Today's guest has spent his career right at that intersection. Dr. Seth Hollar is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Wiser Systems, a company developing advanced real-time location and tracking technology using ultra-wideband radio systems to help industries track assets with extreme precision. He's been the primary inventor behind key innovations in the company's technology and has helped build a growing portfolio of patents in real-time localization systems. Before building Wiser, Seth worked across some of the most demanding environments in engineering, from aerospace work at Lockheed Martin on space exploration missions to research in MEMS and nanotechnology as a fellow at Toshiba, and later shaping the next generation of founders as associate director of the Engineering Entrepreneurs program at North Carolina State University. With degrees from MIT and a PhD from UC Berkeley, he has spent decades thinking how deep technical innovation actually makes its way from research labs into real world impact. In this conversation, we're going to talk about that journey, what it takes to translate academic research into real companies, the mindset shift from scientist to founder, and how deep tech innovators can bridge the long road between breakthrough ideas and scalable products. Seth, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thank you for that introduction. Just a slight update. So since about a year and a half, I've been CEO of Wiser as well. So it's the journey is from academics to CTO to CEO now. But just I don't know if there's any one given path for how people traverse it, but I can certainly give you a little bit of background of the path I've gone through. Um, and I think it's probably a little bit of people might be predisposed to the area of entrepreneurship as well. Um, so just jumping back a few decades, I graduated from MIT in electrical engineering. I ended up working at Lockheed Martin in Denver for their aerospace program. They were doing Mars orbiter and rover. And during that period in time, I was definitely deep in research. This was kind of a defense-related building, windowless, and you're very much working on your thing. Um, it was interesting in the sense that any sort of promotion opportunities were really very much based on seniority. So you had to be there like 15 years, 20 years in order to get promoted to where you need to be. And I quickly kind of realized, though, I loved the aerospace industry, the idea of working in the lab in the windowless building wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. And so I more or less after a little bit of time moved over to California, and this was down during the 1990s, and there was kind of a big entrepreneurial boom with the internet, um, blossoming more or less during that time. there were a lot of startups. And so that was probably kind of the first taste I was able to see firsthand of, that entrepreneurial activity. And it sounds a little bit cliche per se, but definitely being in that area during that boomtown was eye-opening. Ultimately, I did go to UC Berkeley. I did work on micro robots. So great academic related work. But after graduating, did a little bit of travel, lived in the UK a little bit, worked on, instead of pursuing MEMS or micro robots, decided to try my hand in software development and selling, basic, automation software through these standard online software marketplaces. That was a little bit my first foray into, hey, you can build something, it works, but will people buy it?
Yeah.
And it turns out that yes, people buy it, but do they buy it at the scale that you need it to in order to make it a sustained business? That in and of itself is the question. Uh, a little bit long story short, I did have some time at Toshiba in Japan for a few years and came back to Raleigh as kind of a middle point where both my wife and my parents were located. One was located in Florida, the other was located in Ohio. So this seemed like an ideal location. And during this point in time, I both wanted to be associated with academia and also pursue some entrepreneurial opportunities. And I did get a position at NC State in the Engineering Entrepreneurs Program that was headed by Dr. Tom Miller, and then I worked with Dr. Steve Walsh for a number of years. So on the academic side, I was working with students, providing some guidance on how they could go through their own journey of entrepreneurialism, and then on my side, working to figure out how to start my own opportunity. Ultimately, when you say, hey, how do you bring things out of the lab and into a company? Um, the journey of Wiser System wasn't exactly like that, but I've definitely been exposed through North Carolina State University, that activity going on. Um, my experience was a lot with dealing with undergraduate students who had ideas and wanted to make those ideas a reality. And some of those ideas weren't necessarily based on years of grant research or research funded grants. It was more of, hey, this idea I've experienced in my life, it could work. Let me go and try it. Maybe it was a specialized pill dispenser, or maybe it was a automated welding piece, or maybe it was a cocktail mixer, or maybe it was a way to ferment alcohol faster for whiskey making. All of those ideas were student led, and we tried to provide the guidance to make that a reality. I know I didn't exactly answer your question, but that's just a little bit of background of where I was coming from.
I love it, and it's an amazing background. Now let me ask you this first. How do you think your academic experiences shape your mindset as a founder and a tech leader?
Well, certainly uh, the experience provided through companies like Wiser or other opportunities I had definitely had some differences with academia. Uh, the I think where the opportunity in academia is exactly where you would think it would be. It provides the grounding and understanding of how you go and develop a technical solution. Whereas on the company side, it's all about how can we make something that someone will buy and give us enough money to survive and blossom. Um, and that is very much true, either with the students that we deal with from the engineering side or with whatever licensable technology is within the university, or say in the tech program, both business students and engineering students get together and try to find out how to take this licensable technology and commercialize it. But it's one thing to say on an academic level, hey, this makes sense. How can we make it to fit a certain application? That's one thought. It's easy to say that, but just actually making it happen is a profoundly different mindset. It requires a lot of hard work and a lot of effort, and it's not something where if someone shows you instructions, you can just simply do it. You really have to be on the ground level, constantly thinking of how does this solution or product or potential product I have, how that will address the customer's need to a point where they're willing to work with you and pay you money in exchange for this product or service. Um, and oftentimes, like in everyone's life, right? If you're not doing that daily of what I would call kind of selling or thinking how you might sell or how to position the product, as say I was when I was younger, or probably 90% of people out there, that mindset is probably something you need to learn or experience firsthand to be a more effective entrepreneur. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Tell me, how did that happen for you when you had that mind shift, mindset shift? Um, how and when did that happen? And was it hard, or was it something that you realized, okay, if I'm going to survive, I need to change the way I think and I need to focus? Because now it's a given. You completely understand it. You live it on a daily basis. But when you first changed, how was that?
Well, it's a change by necessity, obviously. If you are putting yourself in a position where, say, you recently graduated from college and you have no job and you want to start a company, or say, hey, I'm going to take a break from this job that provides consistent income, almost not quite, but almost regardless of the level of performance that you have, and then put yourself in this position where this kind of realization or epiphany comes up. It's like, wow, if I don't actually perform, if I don't sell, then I have no income.
Yeah.
It's by necessity, right? A trial by fire, maybe. Yeah, you obviously, Matthew, you obviously understand this.
Yeah.
Uh, so I would say, it's an evolving element for me, but most certainly it gets hardened more and more as the years go on. Early on with Wiser Systems, my co-founder and I, Elaine and I started the company. She actually started a little earlier, and I came in and joined her. And we were able to get started through grants. And grants are a great thing in the U.S. especially. You have SBIR, Small Business Innovation and Research Grants, effectively providing you a fair amount of money that is non-dilutive funding. And so if you have a good idea and you have the right department to apply to, you have this chance of getting that award, and it has different phases. And especially for deep tech, where uh, it's something where it doesn't take 2 months to just create a software product and start selling it. It takes multiple years of development. That can be a good avenue for starting it. So when when Elaine and I first got a grant, we were like very excited, right? We have this funding coming in for a year or two in time and had some time to do development. But that's not quite orienting the product towards a customer ultimately. It's a means to get there, but on the technical side, but it doesn't get you there on the sales or the customer side. So a lot of companies may get these grants or startup companies, but if they don't quite service the customer with a product towards the end and their money runs out, they're still at the same challenge that they were
Yeah,
before, albeit they may have kind of a prototype at the end. So for me, those realizations that, hey, this grant funding is running out, we have to really put together a product to make it compelling, was additional kind of push to be very cognizant of serving the customer or finding the niche that works in our industry. Does that make sense to you?
makes sense. What about your students and when you see younger generations, do you think they um or what's the percentage of people you see that are able to make that change? Because I gather that even some people that feel the necessity still struggle to make the change, or do they all make the change and realize that's their focus and do it well?
So, during my tenure teaching the engineering entrepreneurs program, which I ended last year, so I'm working full time at Wiser without any academic association. Um, so I was there, gosh, what do I want to see, 18 years? It's actually a very small percentage of students that take their idea from the class and turn it into a company. Um, that's not a bad thing, per se. The goal of the class wasn't necessarily just make instant entrepreneurs, but give them the skill set that they could be entrepreneurial or start their own companies years down the road once they have more industry experience in the area they are in, or be entrepreneurial within, say, a more corporate type structure within the company that they're at. But we have had within the university, a number of teams over my very long tenure there, get investment, be successful, make sales, or for some of them, make it more of a career type of company where they're staying there for a long period of time. What we hope to do there is just provide them with the knowledge that we're talking about right now of it's not just about the technical solution, it's how it fits with a customer and orienting it so that it makes sense for a potential customer to purchase it.
What do you think are the most strategic um, ways of bridging that gap and being able to scale that between lab proof of concepts and scalable products, both for you and for your, for when you were mentoring students? What works best?
Um, well, I would say I haven't figured out the formula for all cases, but I'll just tell you what I know. Um, there's kind of three pillars that I see. There is the product, there is the getting people to listen to you about your product, and then there's the hey, I have the people listening to me about the product. Now I have to get them to buy my product.
Yeah.
So those three pillars have to work in clockwork fashion in order for you to be successful. And during a startup phase, each of those needs to be addressed. Maybe on the deep tech side, there's a fair amount of technical development on their product. But if you're developing a product where it's really hard to get people to come and talk to you, that's not a viable company. Or suppose you have a product and you got people to come and talk to you, but then when you're making a sale, you realize that the people and the product don't match.
Yeah.
That doesn't work either, right? So it's those three pillars that when they work and you can refine them and you have a potential to scale with that being successful. Now crossing the chasm is basically um, you have early adopters, right? Early adopters like new technology will be willing to spend a little bit of money, knowing that there's risk in the outcome. That is not where the bulk of the market is. Um, but to get the bulk of the market, they tend to be more conservative. They are more, return on investment or ROI driven. And if you're not making a compelling case to them about how they're going to get a return on investment, or if they detect that there is risk in purchasing your system, that is where you could fall down. Um, and that part is, say, on the sales side, you got them come the door, you have to talk to them. Now you have to convince them not only that, this is the right product for them, but you are also still a relatively small company. You don't have a reputation yet. You might have, you know, maybe no reference sites or no one you can point to as saying this is a customer that bought it that absolutely loves it. Um, so so that's an area that you would need to develop from a reputational point of view. Sorry, I'm tangenting a little bit, but
No,
each
no.
of these, as you're going through the chasm, has to be addressed. And most certainly, as a small company, when you're talking and making the sale, there's a reputational element to that as well, so that they believe what you say by presenting yourself in a certain way or having references, so that it's not just you, but they see people or colleagues also, supporting what you're saying or liking the product. I don't really know how, there's the passage of time and being really dedicated to it. People really like to say, "Hey, I can scale from 1 million to 10 million in a year or two." Does that actually work? It really depends, but you have to get that sale to work. You have to get the people to talk to make the sale, and you have to make sure that the product that you're selling is actually going to work. There's other things like, hey, when you scale, you have to make sure that um, the basically the cost of goods sold, or what you're building, does it cost more than the sale price, because that can really slow down growth as well, obviously. Scaling, you assume, well, I can figure out the details, but if you don't figure out the details early enough, then you've chipped yourself up, you're burning cash, you need more investment. um, so anyways, lots of different angles and thoughts on that one. But that's kind of the general philosophy.
No, I love it, and it's part of. There are things you can teach, and there are things you cannot teach, and it's up for each individual to live the journey, right? Because there are so many grays, and everything is more gray than black and white, right? And so there's like, what do you do in each situation? And I assume that even for you and for everyone, balancing technical innovation with the practical constraints of commercial viability, customer needs, and business timelines can be tricky, right? So you probably, there's no formula for this, but what have you learned? You were talking about the different pillars. Um, what have you learned about balancing those? In software, many times there is this praise for putting stuff out there, shipping. Done is better than perfect. When technical rigorosity is so important, does that happen the same way, or you have to be very careful about what you are putting out there because that can then have a negative impact on the rest? How do you feel about that?
So Wiser Systems sells a real-time location system. It's basically a tag and track approach within a manufacturing facility. It is a solution that has a services component, a hardware component, and a software component. Oftentimes, the solution itself is behind a firewall, so we don't have direct access to the server. We have to do a screen share or reach out to the customer. In that scenario, it's probably a little bit different than, say, a software that you have control of the server or it's based in the cloud.
Yeah,
You have the opportunity perhaps to fix it right away.
right.
So your mindset might be a little bit different, right? Ship it out because you can fix it if you've identified a bug. In this case, there is a little more pause in just simply shipping it out because the cost and the friction that you create with the customer, if there is a mistake,
Yeah.
can be, a much larger cost, either through the relationship or just money and resource wise. So there is that element of balance. With that said, making it as easy as possible to do upgrades, to do firmware updates, to have access to the server definitely reduces that barrier where you can have quicker cadences or have a customer that is much more amenable to a little bit more of back and forth. Um, they say that you should ship a product and not use the customer, as kind of the end test point, right? Um, and we do as much as we can within our internal testing. But the reality is probably for most software and most solutions out there is that ultimately the customer will use it in ways that you may not be able to predict. And so there's this end level testing that the customer ultimately goes through that you have to work with um, to to refine your solution to work with that particular customer. Have you had that experience as well from a customer testing perspective?
I think I agree with you. I think in software there is the risk of pushing stuff out early because we can fix it later, and then you start accruing technical debt, and that
Yep.
becomes a problem later on, right? There are if you go too fast, um, then you run into that risk, and I think AI nowadays is um, increasing that risk because everyone can ship stuff faster, right?
Right.
Um, and sometimes we go even faster than we can think about it, and then we put that in front of the customer, and like you said, then you learn the real stuff. With software, most of the times you can adapt very quickly, and for us, I say it's sort of weird because we have 35 active clients and all of them have different products and if they're in different industries doing different things, right? So it works different for each of the industries.
Right.
But I would say the closer you get to hardware, the closer you get to, you know, um, things, then the more careful you have to be versus
Oh
just
yes, absolutely.
right versus just like social media,
Yeah.
etc., which is dangerous as well, but different type.
Our hardware is installed in rafters and ceilings. Sometimes the customer has to pay for a lift for someone to install it. So
Yeah,
we are long past this point, but early on, there were issues where people had to swap out hardware. And that's a learning experience, a learning moment in and of itself. Avoid hardware swaps, at
yeah,
all costs,
yeah,
essentially, for sure. The software is a little bit easier, um, and then, but still, we try what we can to avoid any sort of creating any sort of customer friction on that level. And our solution is a little more uniform than, say, individual products. So it does give us the opportunity to thoroughly test it before it gets shipped out.
yeah,
But that is heavily on our minds. When we do a new version update, we do internal testing and then we might slowly distribute it out. We might have one single customer that we give it to who needs it for a certain feature update or bug fix, and then see how that goes. And if there's any adjustments, we'll give that update to them, and then maybe send it out to two or three more before we finally release it publicly to the rest of the sites.
right.
Just very obviously, just being very careful about um, having in mind the customer, and you know I guess there's another mindset is for our customers, they just want the solution to work and they don't want to think about it.
Yeah,
And the moment you ask them to think about it, you're creating friction.
yeah,
Um, so you have to be very careful and selective of when to reach out to your customers and what you ask of them. Do not assume that they're going to accept that they're going to be co-developers and debugging an issue. Maybe they will because they're motivated to get it work, but don't make that assumption.
yeah,
There are a number of customers that have a solution. Their job is not the job of simply maintaining a wiser solution. A lot of them are operations people or directors of production or uh, process improvement engineers, and they may spend 1% of their time thinking about wiser and then 99% of the time thinking about other things. And so there's definitely a cost to that interruption while they're, excuse me, while they're going throughout their day. And so we also try to be cognizant of that. There's sometimes we reach out to customers to see how they're doing. What percentage of them actually respond to an email saying, "Hey, how are you doing? We'd welcome a chance to talk and see how it's working or tune your system." Offering some free support. Maybe 30%, maybe 20% of them actually respond, but the others do not respond. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It may just be that they're busy doing other things, and we respect that. But this kind of ties into the larger discussion of it's not just about the technical solution. There's elements of interacting with the customer to make this a solution that works for them without consuming their time or creating additional friction. Does
yeah.
that make sense to you?
Yes, most definitely. Um, so let's talk about this for a minute. For founders building deep tech that may take years to commercialize, what advice will you give them about securing investment, partnerships, and a talent and team committed to a long haul vision?
Well, again, there's no formula for that. Just from our own experience, there were some government grants that gave us runway to develop our solution. And during that, we were able to also reach out and do pilot programs with companies in exchange for using them as reference sites. So it sounds kind of straightforward, but it was absolutely not straightforward in any way whatsoever. And I would say when we started, we did not have the end goal immediately in mind that, hey, the manufacturers, aerospace, maintenance, repair, overhaul, or MRO was kind of our go-to market. We had this nascent technology to do tracking, but it didn't have kind of the bells and whistles and surrounding software support that where they could immediately integrate it. We happened across that probably a little more serendipitously. But in this path forward, there's one is getting the funding in place, two, driving towards where the possible market is and getting some pilots in place to get reference sites that you can point other customers to and get referrals in the process. From a team building perspective, um, if you have partners or you have people who want to be founder level participants, there you have to be careful about who you choose for partners or founders. But there's some level of equity associated with that where they take reduced pay, so your resource consumption is less on a cash basis. Or those first employees who you trust, providing them probably stock options, but also needing that cash in order to support those customers through this process. Um, I'll say that it's there are hiccups along the way. Employees leave. You have to figure out a way to maintain that institutional knowledge. not every pilot works out the way you think it is. You may not have the right target market when you first start, so you have to make adjustments along the way, and all that while trying to figure out how to either raise money because you don't quite have a working flow of cash. And that could be through more government grants or through friends and family, or if you're lucky, you can go the VC route as well. Um, but that's kind of the cycle that you're in. Try to establish these early stage customers, try to have enough money in the door, and continue to work on the technical aspects of the product at the same time. And you're running uh, with all three of these, trying to get them to work at the same time, essentially.
Do you? I have a final question to you, Seth. Do you think the people that make it have similar traits, or have you seen very different people from each other make it? I know we keep saying there is no formula, right? But are there traits for people that you go like, oh, this is the typical, success story?
Um, it's I don't know if it's traits so much as just the drive to do it. Like the people who will likely be successful are the ones who are really going to push to do it themselves, to make it happen. I see it as a level of effort compared, as opposed to like a special trait.
Right.
It requires a lot of hard work, a lot of um, faith that in the end, there will be a return, knowing that while you're in the trenches, it's not quite there yet. And being able to be at peace with that. And maybe your spouse being at peace with that as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's key. I love it, and that's a trait. Those are many traits right there. But
okay, so you got me there.
but Seth, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your knowledge with us here. Um, and I hope that we can stay in touch. I will be probably visiting Raleigh in May. I hope I get to see you again. And it's always good to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Yes, thanks so much for inviting me, and absolutely looking forward to seeing you in May.